was in California working on music, um, finishing a project, and I was thinking about just how we got this art shit all twisted. And when I say that is that there's this idea that we've been sold about what art's purpose is. And I do believe that art's purpose is all the beautiful, sweet, wonderful, frilly things that we believe art's purpose is and can be, and it can change the world and it can change people's lives and it can inspire people and it can do all these things or whatever. But like from working in the art industries, the music business, the art industry, the filmmaking, all these different things or whatever, you quickly kind of learn that art is exists because the elite allow it to kind of exist. And I hate to say terms like elite because it just feels like this big catch-all. But what I mean is that when you think about the history of like fine art and like all the old Renaissance paintings and all these different paintings or whatever that were created, it was like these artists were sustained because their existences were sustained and their work was sustained and their studio practices were sustained because they had a direct connection to a church or a kingdom or this or that who commissioned these things and wanted portraits and wanted art and wanted all these things or whatever, but it wasn't this thing that was allowed to be inherent, right? Not to say that people are creative, but there was this inherent, this idea that there's this inherent desire to paint or to do this or to do that or to be able to participate in it, and you should be allowed to be participating in it or whatever because you feel that, you know what I mean. But it's always been kind of connected to these larger financial entities and forces that have influenced the art that we see today. The Louvre doesn't exist, or the work inside the Louvre doesn't exist in a vacuum. You know what I mean? Or like any museum that you ever go to, that work does not exist in a vacuum. It's nice to see it, and it's nice to experience it, and it's inspiring, and it might make you want to paint one day or whatever it is. But there's very rarely context behind why you're even seeing this stuff in the first place, and who it was looted from, and who it was stolen from, and who funded it, and what happened to that person after that happened or whatever it is, right? And like I think, a lot of times learning about art and artists, we hear all these like tragic figures and all of these people who like just made art until they died, and they did all these things and they made all this great work, and you hear all these Van Gogh stories and these all these different things or whatever, and like his life ended however his life ended because there's all these theories, but it's like because of the fact that he was not supported by any institution or any entity at all while he was alive. He was just making work because that's all he could do, and that's all he felt like he could do with his life. He didn't want to do anything else. He wanted to paint, and he did everything in his life to be able to paint. And he didn't make any money. He didn't get any opportunities. People didn't like his work, so on and so forth. And so he was not held up in the regard, despite his talent, despite whatever, until after he passed and people pushed and pushed for him, and then institutions decided that he was somebody of importance. And so the fucked up thing is realizing that nearly every single piece of art that you've ever interacted with in the mainstream, you got to see it because somebody up there thought it was important, right? And then if you look at the morals and the ethics of those people and the things that they do, then that then colors what art means or can mean or should be or whatever it is. And so when we have like, modern day versions of this, which you like Super Bowl performances or any of these different things, you have to like look at like what is being said in these performances, and when you think about it, say, oh, like these things are so great or whatever, it's like what motive could the individuals who put this together have about anything? Like if you're hearing this record on the radio, like what is that doing for people? Like what is that doing for this company? What is that doing for this entity? And so much of it just comes back to pacifying, you know, people making money, but then also pacifying the public with very curated, very and this is like a weird thing to kind of think about, but it's like some of these messages, some of these things feel radical, right? But they only feel radical because they're in the mainstream. They're actually not radical at all. It's not radical to say that racism is bad. It's not radical to say that we should treat each other nice and love each other and not hate each other because we look different or think differently, or not even think differently, but like look differently or whatever it is. That's not a radical thing. That's a normal thing. But because like this country is so fucked up, it's like it's so revolutionary to do that. But when you look at like the track record of the true revolutionaries, it, it doesn't line up. These people are damn near centrists, you know what I mean, in comparison to true revolutionaries and people who are trying to push against um, capitalism and push against imperialism and push against all of these different things that are exploitation and so on and so forth. Like your favorite artist is not necessarily fighting for workers' rights. Your favorite artist is not necessarily fighting for the most downtrodden and fucked up circumstances that people exist in, right? Like they talk about the issues that they're allowed to talk about. They produce the records they're allowed to produce because there's a system that allows them to keep financing their art, that keeps them functioning, keeps them living well. And that's what this is, right? And it's always been that. And this idea that it's been anything else is just you and your personal attachment to this thing. But as somebody who's been an artist, their whole life, I know what my relationship to my craft is, and my relationship to my craft is completely different than the relationship to the business of what this is. And the business of what this is at this moment in time, and maybe always, has been to serve the elite and to distract the public. And another thing that I was thinking about the other day, I was like, dang, like to be an artist, to be an entertainer in the modern era is the same as it was in medieval times. We're jesters. Like we exist to, you know, uh, distract the public and entertain the elite, right? And if we say anything that does not align with that, it does not align with their perspectives or their missions or their agendas, then they get us the fuck out of here, and you never have a career again. And we've seen it a million times, and that's what this is. And it doesn't mean that you should stop creating art. It doesn't mean that you should stop making music or whatever it is, but it does mean that you maybe should divorce the way that you view success in the music industry or the film industry or the art industry from whether the mainstream accepts you, or whether elite people fund your work or fund your lifestyle or fund your housing. And that's exactly what was happening to people, you know, in the past. When you learn about art history, it's like these entities, these kingdoms, these whatevers would fund the lifestyles of these artists and entertainers, give them housing, give them women, give them this, give them that, give them whatever they wanted, as long as they, played that symphony, as long as they, played the violin, as long as they painted the picture and portrait and all these other things. But if they did anything outside of that, they were banished, right? And that still exists in a modern capacity. And unfortunately, it exists for your favorite artists, no matter who you name. And I can argue that a lot of the artists who don't want to participate in these things quit and don't release music and stay the fuck out the way, and have divorced themselves in the music industry. And we might think that they fell off or this, that, and the other, but they made a strategic choice to like not participate in something that I think that they understood was very harmful to them and society, and they could not function within it, making whatever records you're being asked to make by these entities. So, yeah.